Hello, welcome. I have been looking forward to this episode for a few weeks since we decided to do it. This is going to be a fun episode for us here. It's going to be how to transcend the IRS. And it's been a wonderful experience that I've had learning about the IRS, learning about humanity, and learning the way out of this trap. With me today is Michael Mellott, CPA. He's going to be joining me very shortly on this topic. This is something that it was a discussion that we had during tax season, because the IRS can really get the best out of somebody and can really make you to make incredibly poor decisions because of the stress. And so, this is sort of, why, what's the way out of this trap, right? Because let's be honest about what we have here. Let's be honest about the tax system that we have and the truth of the matter, that we know a few things that are undisputable, really. And that when we think of a lawmaker in Washington, D.C., one thing we know they don't do is make laws, right? We know that senators and congressmen, what they don't do is write laws. They never do. Rather, the laws are handed to them, and then they say, hey, look, I have a bill. Now, these bills, these laws, these bills are written by attorneys. But what attorneys? Who's exactly doing that? Do we even know who? And the answer is we're not even entirely sure who's writing the bills. And now I know from my own personal experience and my own professional experience, I should say, that one such law that I happen to be intimately familiar with, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, that was a law that was passed, a bill that was passed in 2010 as part of the HIRE Act. I know this. The lawyer who claims to have written the law could not have written the law because she got so many facts of her own law so wrong. Not only did she get the facts of her own law wrong, she also got the facts of the landscape surrounding the law wrong. And I thought that was interesting. I really thought that it was interesting. Why is this person claiming to write the law that she doesn't seem to know a lot about, right? Because they come from places we're not supposed to know. Where these laws are written, we aren't exactly supposed to know where they come from. And that is basically the biggest problem that we have. And I think that's the indisputable thing. We have laws. So if you think about it, if the lawmakers who are supposed to represent us don't write the laws, it's other people who we don't know who. Okay, then how in any way, in shape or form, could we say we have a representative republic, constitutional republic? We actually have no representation. And here's the thing too, not only do we know they don't write the laws, we know they don't read them. We don't read them. So therefore, we actually don't have any representation in Washington, D.C. And this is all known, it's all in the open. And so I think one of the first things we want to do when we try to transcend the IRS is to really take an honest inventory of what we actually have in this country. We kind of have in my mind, I think we have kind of the worst of both situations. We have the claim that this government represents us because the government will say so. Oh no, we really do represent you. But we have the tyranny of the worst tyranny imaginable, the worst. And they won't admit to it. They won't own up that they want to rule us. That the entire Constitution with its three branches, they're all ruled by somebody else. Who? I'm not sure. But I know this, it doesn't reflect our will. That when I go through these tax laws, these complicated tax laws, I always think to myself, who was the constituency? Who was the constituency that wanted this law? And you find places, who would ever vote for this? Who would ever vote to say, like, you know what? I want to be taxed on income I never receive. That's right. I want to be taxed on income I never receive. There's a law for that. There's a law that's passed. And I could show you that tax law. That's guilty. That was part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It will tax you. Or I'm sorry, it's not guilty. It's a transition tax, which taxed you on income you definitely didn't receive. No one would ever vote for that. Who would vote for something like this? Oh, you know what? If I don't file a piece of paper, I want basically my entire net worth to be subject to seizure by the government. Who would ever vote for that? What I could tell you, it's actually not the law, but it's a regulation, that is actually what happens. If you don't file a piece of paper with the government, if you have a foreign bank account and you don't file a piece of paper, your entire net worth can be, or not your entire worth, but 50% of your net worth can be taken with you. I know Michael had a little bit of problems getting on there. Now he's back here. So here he is. I gave a nice little introduction, Michael, about sort of the general problem, nature of the problem. Well, let's get into your story, Michael. Let's get right into it and start off. By the way, I just want to give an introduction to Michael Mellott, our tax director, and just an incredible asset to my firm. He is heaven sent. I am convinced, and I'm going to tell you this. Michael is a devout Orthodox Christian, and he's really selling the brand. If you're looking for integrity in your entity, that you have a rock solid tax director, a rock solid person, he's really making the case. I don't know if all Orthodox Christians have as much integrity as you, but I got to say, Michael, it is really appreciated what you've been adding, what you've been doing for our firm, and the smiles and the referrals we're getting. And I got to think there's some connection between your own personal integrity and how you treat others. And it's just, it's such a breath of fresh air. You are really a rock that one could build an incredible empire around. Wonderful. So Michael, thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Anthony. And my apologies for the technical difficulties. But it's Orthodox Lent, and things like this happen. So
and so I'm sure there's a fast, because you guys fast about half of the day, right? In fact, half of the year is about a fast, right?
Yeah.
Right. Always be fasting.
Haven't had meat since March 10th.
Right. All right. There you go. He's doing it. So he really does it. And I have visited his church, which is absolutely lovely. I mean, it's amazing. It is cool. It is really cool. I've never been in an Orthodox church before, but it is much more mysterious and intense. Intense is the word. And I appreciated the 3 hours of singing. I did, because that's what and I'll get into that a little bit more, but it was really just an amazing kind of cool. It's a great perspective. I really recommend, anyone check out an Orthodox church just to get a perspective, to see what they're up to. And it's really impressive. So Mike, I want to kind of talk about your story, how you wound up where you are, a CPA who's a hardcore follower of Christ. How you wound up here. Were you always this way? What tell me a little bit about, why you became a CPA and where you were at the time, what you did afterwards.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what you exactly discussed before, but I know you and I, just before the call, we're talking about kind of your options in this society, just what we have. 3 options are just like isolating yourself, getting depressed, or just becoming like a social pariah. And just growing up, I was just a run-of-the-mill, like Fox News kind of guy by default with my parents. And in high school, I started to actually read because I wanted to be able to argue my point against people. And that kind of just led me down the rabbit hole to libertarianism. And I became extremely hardcore libertarian, which taxes for libertarians are very morally dubious, especially when they're for things other than like defense and the court system, things that are just like completely necessary. But when it's for like bombing people that you've never declared war on, we kind of don't exactly like that sort of thing. So basically, in college, I was just so against taxes that, first of all, I wanted to leave the U.S. I was like, I don't want to pay taxes for these guys. Just the way they use the money that we send up there is just completely evil. At the time, I wasn't. In college was also the time I basically became agnostic. So I wasn't even a Christian then. I wouldn't have considered myself one, but I just thought it was morally dubious what they were doing with the tax money. So I was like, okay, my goal in life is to not pay any tax to the U.S. government. And my dad was a CPA, tax guy, still is. And that was always kind of my default, which was see if I'm good at it because it runs in the genes. 3 generations of tax accountants. So kind of with those together, I went into the international niche because I was like, well, I want to know how to reduce my taxes as much as possible. So let's focus on people that expatriate from the US because that's what I want to do. And so after college, I went to Texas. I grew up in Ohio, but Ohio, it's kind of a basket case. So I went to Texas because I was like, well, that's like the most free state in the union. And plan was always to move abroad. So then I moved abroad in 2019. I had a few months before COVID hit and just bounced around from country to country trying to find the freest place. We'll probably discuss this later, but I always wanted a homestead as well. And just really helping people pay as little as possible to the U.S. government was satisfying to me. And that's kind of one reason why I enjoy the job is just because I see where the taxes go. And I kind of always have that in me. But yeah, my personal journey kind of just led me abroad for a few years. And with all just the COVID craziness going on, I decided to move back to the U.S. because I want to be able to like read the laws since there's so many restrictions in a lot of different countries. So I figured if I'm going to have a family, then I want to be able to actually know the laws, know what I'm getting into, know if I'm going to get jailed for having more than 20 people at a Christmas party or Christmas dinner. So I don't want to end up in like an Armenian jail. So with all those things, I moved back to the US. And I mean, my first tax return really hurt because I'm actually paying tax to the US again. But I think overall, I think it was a really good decision. I mean, once I moved here, that's when I started to get more interested in Christianity. Because also, I've always been a culture warrior. And part of moving abroad was to find a culture that was still just homogenous and had a strong culture, wasn't just getting watered down like you see all in the West, just becoming degenerate more and more. So and that was kind of the thing. But then also, I just was asking myself, why was the West so strong? And I mean, it seemed to be the kind of the baseline was Christianity. So I was like, well, even though I don't believe in Christ being God, I guess I should read the Bible. It's the number one book in Western civilization, the history of Western civilization. So I might as well figure out like why we became so great. And those kind of weird reasonings in my mind is how I came back to Christ. And it was really just exploring different Protestant churches because I grew up Catholic. I knew I wasn't Catholic. Sorry, Anthony. Novus Ordo Catholic, Vatican II.
Well, we're not all a fan. We're not all fans of Vatican II, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was like, well, I must be Protestant then, because I never heard about Orthodoxy before, and somehow I stumbled upon Orthodoxy, and I had gone to a couple of Latin masses right before my introduction to Orthodoxy, and I really liked those. And I was like, okay, I really like what I see here. A lot of young families, a lot of kids, as we'll get into later. Oh
yeah. So
it's like, okay, I like these guys' priorities, kind of my similar priorities too. And then stumbled upon Orthodoxy, and ever since then, just I feel like it's the truth, and that it's the undiluted faith hasn't been changed since the time of the apostles. Just very traditional. So appeal to my just very traditional outlook on life. And everyone there, I mean, 5 kids is like a good start for an Orthodox guy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that actually gets into what we'll be talking about too, that sort of where your true wealth is, where your true wealth is. Yeah. And so here's your situation. You grow up and you're sort of like, like me, kind of like the default conservative, like, oh yeah, this stuff going on here doesn't seem right. And then you're presented this alternative as the solution, but then that sort of patriotic solution has a whole host of problems that comes with it that we kind of ignore. and that doesn't seem to be. Then you're like, wait a second, these conservatives don't seem to be very conservative. Why? And it seems like both parties should really be against dropping bombs on innocent people around the world. But it seems like both. Like, you know what? We really shouldn't be droning civilians. We shouldn't be blowing up people around the world. We shouldn't be
Especially
over.
when the missiles cost like $1 million each.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of money. It seems like something like
conservative. That's what got me, which is like, well, taxes. I mean, if you're talking about like a Patriot,
right.
those things run like $1 million each, and we're giving like so many of those to Ukraine. It's like that's costing a lot of money. We could put that into better use.
And I think for me, what clued me in on it was like, wait a second, this conservative thing is just lip service. They're the thing you give your money to us so that we could lose again and again and again.
Yeah.
And so it's just all lip service they constantly give. And so I don't know when I gave up on them. When it finally is like, this isn't right at all. You guys don't do any. It's like you guys just do everything bad I don't want you to do, and do none of the good. So as I look at it, it's like that's when, and during this time, as I become more conscious of what the taxes are, as I research issues and I research regulations, where they come from, I research law, and I find a whole bunch of things are made up. They're made up and they're not there, and that we're given this entire presentation of what the truth is, and it's not. There's actually, and that's when I came to believe there's actually no one in Washington, D.C. that's on our side. Because if there was, the first thing was like, well, actually, guys, we need to read these laws. We need to read these laws. And then you have someone like Elizabeth Warren, right? And she's an expert on taxation. How do I know that? Well, because she knows how we should tax. She says, you know what, there should be a wealth tax. There should be a wealth tax. And then she, what was interesting, she released her return. She released her return of her and her husband. And that was wonderful. She disclosed it to us. I noticed something, though. I noticed something very interesting. The top tax expert in the world, Elizabeth Warren, top tax expert in the world, she actually had a kind of simple return. There was a Schedule C, some royalty income, not really some long-term capital gains, really not that much. A Schedule D, Schedule B, Schedule C. That was it. Nothing foreign, nothing all that complicated. But guess what? She needed a CPA to prepare her return for her. And I was just thinking, that's impossible. That's impossible. Elizabeth Warren is a top expert on taxation, and she had a simple return. Why would she need a CPA, right? That's some reason she does, right? And I think that would be one fix to it. If we actually had some representation in this, is that no one in Washington, D.C., no one. If you take a check from the federal government, you cannot use a paid preparer. Do it yourself. Do it yourself, right? That would fix a lot of things. But right, they don't do that. Like, no, we'll make things so complicated that we ourselves will need to use tax professionals, but we make plenty of money with our insider trades to pay for it, so it's not a big deal. And so that's how we kind of know that both sides are 100% united against the American people. We know that, and I've been there. It's just, in DC is a terrible thing, and that here you are, and you're trying to make sense of it, though, right? You're like, and this is where it just can consume you. And this is the other thing too, is that we have this system where the confusion, Michael, I dare say, Michael, is intentional. The confusion is intentional. And the outcomes are intentional. And why? Because it beats you down. It's intended to beat you down and drag you down so that you are easier to control. And then you will make those dumb decisions, those so-called dumb decisions, because you are in a period of stress and you're not sure what to do. And then when you make that dumb decision, they're there. Oh, what'd you do that for? What'd you do that for? Meanwhile, they're not being clear. There's numerous examples where the tax code is very unclear, and the IRS, and by the way, the entire process of being examined by the IRS is one of the greatest fears of people. And so, and I see this, it's a constant thing where people are like, yeah, I probably pay too much in taxes, but I don't want to risk an audit. So that is that people will give up their legal rights because they're afraid of the legal process. And with good reason. So. With good reason.
Yeah. It's like, do I want to spend 10 plus hours like talking to these clowns? Probably not. Yeah, and I don't know, maybe this is good. I often think about this. I do as a traditional Catholic, I try to be. Every day I pray the rosary. And on Fridays and
Tuesdays, we have our sorrowful mysteries. And there is the meditation on Christ taking his cross to the place of the skull. And I think about that one. I'm like, you know what? Because here's the thing. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough that they crucified Jesus, but rather they needed to humiliate him and exhaust him by forcing him to bring the instrument of his death to a top of a hill where they would nail him up. So it was part of the humiliating process. Now, perhaps my analogy is off base here a little bit, but when I think about tax returns, it's like, it seems like, it's like you can't even punish us. You can't even just steal with us, but rather you need to drag us through this humiliating process that we have to pay for, that it's a mandated duty. We can't get out of it. And you can't get out of it. And you can't say, you know what? I don't understand this tax code. I just want to hire this professional. I'm going to rely on his opinion. And the IRS said, well, that's fine, but you're still on the hook for anything that they say. So it's this humiliating process in order to get up to the stage. And I'm sorry, this is what I think about. And oftentimes, it's oftentimes, our first tax season is in Lent. And it's like, it's really hard to avoid that because we actually do the sorrowful mysteries on Sunday too, where we have this thing where the government's like, yeah, no, we need to humiliate you first. And then this is the thing. We're going to tell you this is voluntary. We're going to tell you this is what you want, but we're going to make you do this thing that, by the way, we can't do ourselves. We can't do it ourselves, but we're going to make you do it too. And then, then you get to things like this, which is like, it's unconsciously bad. You want to know how bad the IRS is? The average reading comprehension of an adult in America is the 6th grade reading level. Right. And we could thank, I guess, the Department of Education for that, our federal dollars doing so much good there, that we have a population that is literate, but not all that functionally literate. And the literacy rate is appalling compared to it was 100 years ago when we were before we had the income tax. Appalling is now. What's interesting, and it's depending on which scoring mechanism you use, because I had to try this out. So I copied and pasted the instructions to IRS Form 1040 into something that calculates the reading difficulty. And the truth is that the IRS Form 1040 instructions, your basic tax return somewhere between the 9th and 10th grade level. The instructions to the form that every American is on the hook for is written above the average American's intelligence, reading comprehension. And that's whoa, who voted for that? I don't want to vote for laws I don't understand, nor can ever understand. And that's half the country, more than half the country, really. More than half the country will never, ever be able to understand the tax code. And that confusion, right? And that confusion, and and this is often the
amount,
ugly,
how big the tax code is.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Oh, by it is. It's just, I mean, that's where you have to say this is intentional. And my dad was in the other night, yesterday. He goes, back when they used to do tariffs, that was easy to figure out. I'm like, right. It's like anyone can figure out what your tariff is. It's, basically this is what it is. Okay. Add this amount on there. Yeah. So when our country was when our country was funded by tariffs, it was really easy to figure out. You didn't need to read much. You didn't need a tax attorney. Any system that has like the fact that a tax attorney is a lucrative career in the United States of America is an indictment of the tax code. My entire existence shouldn't be. Everything I own I shouldn't have, but yet I do. And people pay me ungodly sums an hour when I think about it. People pay ungodly sums to figure out their tricky situation that maybe somebody else could, maybe somebody else couldn't.
We talked about that in the last talk. How both our jobs should be abolished.
Our job should be abolished. That's absolutely right. So now, okay, so I guess this is my question. So you're sort of moving away, because this is sort of where I am. As a conservative, I've adopted, in my own story, I've adopted. Hey, look, I'm like, here's my goal. I'm trying to create a business that's going to be worth $50 million, and I can cash out. And then my plan after that is to just live on my retirements, put it in a private placement life insurance. right? Oh yeah. So I paid no taxes for the rest of my year. And that's really what I was going for. I'm like, yeah, I want to build my business up to this, want to build it up for this, want to build it up for this, because one day in the future, I'll be able to live. I'll be able to really live because then I'll have my money. Then I sort of think it's like, but again, Anthony, what's the purpose of your money? It's like, well, so that I have a great life. Like, okay, does having money guarantee you have a great life? I'm like, oh God, no. Oh God, no, because I certainly have clients with far more money than I do. And are they happy? Not always, right? And so like, wait a second. Why is my goal to get more money when I know that's not really the thing that I actually want? What I want is everyone to love me, right? That's what I want. And money is your stand-in for that. Hey, look, if I give you this money, will you be my friend? Yeah. Basically, hey, if I give you this money, we'll build a house. Yeah. Hey, if I give you this money, we'll take care of my dog. Yeah. But what if you didn't need money because you had everything taken care of? And that's kind of where I started to think, wait a second, there is a way to transcend the IRS. There is a way to transcend the IRS. And for me, and tell me if you disagree with me, but I was like, wait a second. A tax return does not really capture your true, if you think about income, when we think about what income is, what is income? It's like, well, according to Glenshaw Glass, the Supreme Court's test for income, income is an accession of wealth clearly realized over which you have dominion, right? And that's what it's supposed to be. But then I think about a whole bunch of things that would satisfy that test, but aren't considered income. Mm-hmm. There's a whole bunch of things. And I guess I can't go into that too much right now, but let me give you a quick example. Okay. So here's one. And I was mentioning to you this earlier, but the story of my mountain bike. 2020 hit, my business was not doing well. And I didn't have any money, but I loved a mountain bike. And my mountain bike was beat. And I also love mountain biking so much, I build trails. I build trails, and people know me as a trail builder, and I build great trails. People love it. I work with other guys to do it, and we're wonderful. We do great things. We volunteer a lot, right? And I needed a bike, and everybody knew it. They're like laughing at Anthony, that thing's going to fall apart on you. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's like, it's kind of like, it's all the dust is holding it together. And then one day, it was September 2020. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to get this bike. I don't know what I'm going to do. Client called me and said, Anthony, what's that? Oh, I noticed I got a check of $2,000 from the government. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. Right. That was as part of your refund. He goes, well, I'm no longer a citizen now. I'm like, yeah, but you're still entitled to that money. He goes, well, I don't know. I don't really feel like I'm part of America anymore. I'm like, okay. He goes, so I want to give you the $2,000 of bonus. I'm like, okay, I'm going to let you do that then. Sure. And so I got a $2,000 bonus just because I went above and beyond with a client just to help him out. And really kind of became a close friend of mine, to tell you the truth. So he gave me a $2,000 bonus. And then the other thing that happened was one of my buddies who does trail work with me, sees me do a lot, my buddy Ken, he loves to scour Facebook Marketplace for deals. And so unknown to me, he was scouring Facebook Marketplace for over a month looking for a deal. And then one day he called right after I got my $2,000 bonus. And he said, all right, here's a bike for you. I'm like, okay, I don't think we're going to have the money because this was a Santa Cruz high tower. And this is during COVID when everything is going. You can't even get stuff. This would be a $6,000-$7,000 bike. And I'm like, dude, it is tight here. I am trying to, get this ship right. I don't really have that. He goes, no. I found it. It's $2,800. You're going to buy it tonight. I already talked to the guy. We're leaving right now. And I'm like, okay. And so drove to New Bedford with Ken, who's like, set this all up. Set it all up. I had the cash, I actually was short $100. So I bought this Santa Cruz high tower for $2,700, and it was at least $6,000 if you could find one. Mm-hmm. Now the question is like, where does this show up on my tax return? Where does it show up? The fact that I got something that easily $6,000 if you could get it for less than half the price, and the answer is it came up nowhere. It doesn't show up on my tax return. That I had two people looking to do massive favors for me for something they knew I needed and knew I loved. And it didn't cost me anything to get that massive deal other than they knew who I was and they knew I cared and they knew I was interested in helping people. And that is where you find it. You get the deals, when you get the deals because somebody likes you, That does not show up on a tax return, does it, Michael?
Nope.
And so that's kind of our clue, right? Isn't that maybe the clue on how to transcend this?
Yeah, could be.
Now, when you wake up in the morning, what's your goal, Michael? What is your goal when you wake up in the morning? What's one of your goals, I should say? Who do you serve?
The Lord.
And how do you do that?
Just trying to keep his commandments, be a good person.
Now, do you love and serve?
Well, I try.
Right. And in that loving and serving, and that's the part that I try too. But when you take someone who's, and the way I look at it is we're all under terrible strain in this world. We're all in it together, that everybody's suffering to some degree. So in my mind, whenever you do a favor for somebody, no matter who they are, no matter how much credit you don't get, you're doing the Lord's work. When you look at somebody like, man, they're having a bad day. I can see that person's having a bad day. You know what? I'm just going to go say something to them. I'm going to make a joke. I'm going to try to make them laugh. Why not? And it goes for you. And then I see that come back. So that's kind of where I see is like, wait a second. We want to have our foundation. And this is sort of like, you don't have to believe any of this, right? You don't have to believe any of this if you don't want to. But, the IRS deals with the material world.
Yeah.
So the solution might be a different world, right? The solution to this problem might be a totally different world. So my question for you, Michael, how do you say, when all this, so you enjoy saving people's money on their taxes, but you're also taking a higher look on this because now you yourself, how do you reconcile the taxes you pay to a government you don't agree with your own personal integrity?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously taxes to government that are doing things that they're supposed to do would be just, and I'd be fine with that. But yeah, as it is now, it's basically, well, I'm paying these guys so I don't go to jail. It's more like mafia, paying off the mafia. So, but the mafia actually did a service. They would protect people most of the time. But also, it's more just the mafia guys who threaten to bust your kneecaps if you don't pay them. That's kind of how I view this stuff. So it's like, well, this is the money I need to pay so I can enjoy life and not be thrown in jail or worse.
Yeah, but Michael, if we all just agreed, we don't even need most of the country. We'd only need about 30% of the country to say, you know what, we're just not going to do this. I'm not going to do it. You can't imprison 30% of us. You can't audit 30% of us. Could it be our own? Why wouldn't a massive non-compliance be the answer to say, you know what, I need integrity and this is all a lie and I am just not going to participate in this whatsoever? Why isn't that the better strategy?
First of all, I just don't think it's very realistic.
Okay.
Raising that much awareness. Maybe in the future, but
yeah, well, the problem too, and I think this is, because we were mentioned before, what are your options when you're dealing with the IRS, right? You could just put your head in the sand and, just not pay attention to it. Or you just, get wind up, depressed, and very limited. Or the other option we didn't mention was an armed revolt, right? There's the other one you could do. You can start that. Now, I think the problems with that, there's significant problems with that, huge problems with that. Number one is the first sort of like who goes first. Hey, yeah, we all agree that the tax code is immoral and unjust. We all should not comply. And then we're all looking at each other like, you go first, you go first, you go first. And so that's a problem that no one really wants to go first. I don't want to go first. I comply with the U.S. tax code. I know full well what it is. I know how awful it is. I know how illegal it is. I know how much of a lie it isn't. Yet there I am. Here you go, IRS, right? So the problem is this: is that in my mind, and you and I are, we sort of look at the more or less the actual history of our country, not the PR we're sold. But the actual problem with armed revolutions is that if we actually take a view from the American Revolution, not as someone on the inside, but on the inside, you'd only conclude one thing: the American Revolution failed. It failed in every way. While it was going the right way, that victory was stolen and then was used to create the U.S. Constitution, which gave a taxing power to a federal government that was abused immediately. It was abused. That taxing power was abused immediately. Washington taxed through an excise tax on distillers of alcohol and invaded Pennsylvania with 12,000 troops to enforce his law, many against the people who made Washington's victory possible. Yep. Okay, so that's sort of the part of history we're not really told about. Like, no, Washington was not really a great guy. He really wasn't. Well, he's a father of the country, right? Anyway, so Washington, but the country really did get along pretty well before it got a little bit more. But when you think about if you were in Pennsylvania and you had 12,000 federal troops from Maryland invading you, I don't think you would say, you know what, the good thing we did that revolution. You would say that revolution was a complete failure because really we took a 2% the tax, the British had, and we replaced it with this. And that's the problem with armed revolutions, is they don't necessarily give you the result you're hoping for, but rather people who have been waiting for that kind of have their plans already here in place for that day coming. So that's why I'm like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If an armed revolt would be the solution.
You go back to the same place.
That's all.
Not evolution.
And we're going to repeat without learning one thing. And that's the problem with it. So that's why it's not just necessarily the practical problem with an armed revolution and organizing it and then being the one who expose themselves. It's like, well, what's the reality of it going to happen with it? Oh. And that these upheavals are often the thing designed by people we didn't know. And yeah, they had their problem and now they have their solution. Oh, the problem is this. Oh, we already had the solution ready to go. Wouldn't you know it? Now we have more tyranny. So to me, I don't see that as being the way out because most people are still not aware of what we have. Most people aren't aware of what we have. And I mean, this is where I'm at. I said, I actually think the solution to all of this is just informing people. It's just informing people on what it is and stop with this euphemism and stop believing what the government says about itself. Right? Stop believing what they're telling you. The government is lying. They lie all the time. How can you honestly say we have a constitutional republic with representatives when, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we don't expect lawmakers to write laws and we don't expect them to read what they vote on. And we know that. That's not even disputable. How can we say that this is even close to what represents the will of the people? Now, of course, they're going to separate us. Hey, vote for us. Otherwise, this really bad thing's going to happen. Hey, vote for us. Otherwise, this really bad thing's going to happen, which is both a lie.
Not to mention like the ratio of representatives to the people from where it was when the country started to where it is now.
Yeah.
Not even close. It's like, do you know your personal representative by name? They did back in the day.
Yeah.
Now it's like,
there's no
on the ballot every so often, but I've never talked to this guy.
Right. And we know, and it's, we know now, not every law is, now they do pass laws with handouts here and there, so it doesn't look like they're an open revolt against us. But I think a great example to know truly what the government feels about you is, in our expertise is there's an international compliance. For people with income around the world, for U.S. expats, they have no actually voting power because their votes are diluted among all the various districts. And so we know that, okay, there's no real, these people are overseas, and they're not really going to rally to give any political feedback, potentially vote us out of office, which the elections are fixed anyway. So, I mean, what does it really matter to some degree? But these, you're overseas, and then when you see the government intentionally punishes people overseas, and they intentionally do so because they know there is no blowback to it. There is no big enough lobby that's ever going to care, that's ever going to raise it to their attention. They know it. So when you see where the government can do things without thinking, you see what they do, and it's utterly horrible. It's horrific. It's beyond. That's what they really want to do. But now there is actual political feedback domestically with some constituencies that limit them. But they want to just destroy. I mean, that is what they are. We have a Washington, D.C. that's not controlled by any of the three branches of government. Not all those three branches are controlled by something else. We don't know what. But not one of them is actually representing the people who they claim to. And that's kind of the problem. And again, but as you said, well, this is the result of our armed revolution that's often looked like as a victory, but it's a complete failure. It's got to be, just at this point, it's got to be said a failure. We don't have protected rights. Our Fourth Amendment, which is supposed to protect us from unreasonable searches and seizures. Yeah, that's fine. But now also the like unreasonable search and seizures one. Okay, you have that. But then Title 26, the income tax, imposes a mandate on the Secretary of Treasury to canvass the world for unreported income. So how could that be? We're free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Well, unless we're looking for taxes, then that doesn't apply. So the Bill of Rights goes away for the tax code all the time. So again, we can't look for an armed revolution as a solution because that's what we have right now. So the solution must come from, I would say this, defining your life as a way, something that can't be taxed. There's no transaction. There's no transaction tax. Focus on what's important to you. Build your own wealth independent of US dollars. And then when we think about US dollars, what are they? What are US dollars? Well, the ones we have right now were invented in 1913. They are all debt instruments of a privately owned bank that we are forced to use. What's that?
Now they're not backed by anything.
Now, and they're not backed. Well, they're backed by fear.
Yeah.
They're backed by fear because we have bombs and weapons to hold us all in line. Because it's backed by nothing other than the fear what will happen if we don't do something, right?
Yep.
So that is the nature of where we are. So this is the other thing too, and this is understand like what is there some sort of Bible passage? I think you're a little bit better on me of this. Building your house on sand versus is there something about that? Seems like there should be. Do you build your foundation?
Building on rock.
Right. We want to build on rock. Well, think about this, folks. Your US dollar that actually is created by a bunch of private bankers. You don't own those. Really, you don't. Because consider this. At any point, your dollars can become essentially worthless because those private bankers can print a whole lot more money. And in fact, that's actually what's been happening over the last 110 years. That purchase, right? It's been happening. And now the dollar's worth 2% of what was used to happen. Why did that happen? Only one reason, because they printed a lot more. So the dollars that you're saying, I need these dollars, you need these dollars, just be aware. That's great. You don't control them. Whatever you have, it's not something you can control. So be careful of what you truly, truly value and invest because it's really nothing. They can be nothing. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah, certainly. But
so now,
value, though. I mean, to like exchange because it's a store of your energy, the dollars. So you get paid for your time, and then you just want to obviously move that into something actually of real value that won't be inflated.
And I think that's so. There you go. So you look. I use dollars, but when you get your dollars, try to transfer those into something that's actual wealth.
Yeah.
Try to transfer that into something that's actual wealth. And actual wealth is friends, family, a network of people who are there to help you. Why? Because you're helping them. And you're not looking for anything in return. That is the way out. And then a raising awareness as you're going around, you're able to explain this to people to say, hey, look, just understand our government's dead set against us every which way. There's no Republican, there's no Democrat. There's only them versus us. So let's stop this. Let's stop this idea that we can vote someone in there to solve the problem. No. They're all part of the same problem. They're all part of the same problem. We need to raise our awareness, and we need to get our wealth out of the US dollar. We can use it, and I use it all the time. You can use it as a tool, but don't think that US dollar actually can mean something. And a great example is this. Years ago, why did people have 12 kids? Why did people have 15 kids? Because IRAs didn't exist. If you wanted someone to take care of you in your old age, it's going to be your own kids. So you might want to have a lot. And that's what I would say your true wealth comes into. We're sort of brainwashed. And I think a lot of people are brainwashed to think, oh man, kids are a burden. I don't want to have kids. I don't have kids. That's a luxury belief. That's really a luxury belief. And the reason why you're allowed to have that luxury belief is you believe in the future spending power of the dollars that you are accumulating. But as I just said, well, that requires two things: that your dollar be worth something, and that there's people who want to do it for your dollar, right? There's somebody who's going to want to clean your diapers for your dollars. Are they? Maybe. But I would say your kids are going to be more of a, especially have 12, you could really spread that workload out, where no one's really resenting it. And you get the best treatment. So I would say that it's like focus on true wealth, building a family before the dollar, before these financial products that are out there. The best move you had, absolutely, was to have as many kids as you have. And I stick with that. And I would suggest that to everyone. Do that as your true wealth. And there's nothing, I think, as valuable as kids. I mean, think about it. What would you rather have? Be 85 years old and I got all this money in the world. It's my birthday. And it's like, well, okay, so you went to
my birthday party.
Go to my so you and maybe a girlfriend went to Outback. You went to the Outback Steakhouse for a true Australian steak, and they sang you happy birthday. Well, wasn't that nice? The waitress and the staff at Outback saying you happy birthday. Well, what if you were 80, like you had no money, you couldn't afford to go to Outback. What is your birthday? Oh, all your kids and grandkids and great-grandkids are singing you happy birthday. Which one would be better at that point? And so I'd say that it's like, be aware of the law. And I think this, that part of what the government wants to do is destroy the family, because the family is the antidote to the government. And the family makes a lot of these financial products not necessary. A lot of these things that you have to do, working so hard to pay, for dual income spouses, you got to work so hard to pay for that childcare. Like, wow, you finally have a kid. And I remember handing off my precious baby. Like, okay, I'm going to go with you all day long. Like, this doesn't seem right. You go to your work and I go to my work. You're my kid, though. This doesn't seem right at all. And that's one thing, too, is like, remember that. And I think that, the liberation that was sold to women was like, you know what? You know what's really unthankful? Taking care of a family. What's really get fulfillment in your life is when you're making money for a bunch of shareholders who don't even know your name.
Yeah. When you
That's
spend
true.
Your whole day in a cubicle rather than with your kids.
Right.
Much more fulfilling life.
Right. We're sold that. It's actually a better thing. Well, here's hey, look, here's a big company. I'm going to get a title and they're going to pay me money and they're going to give me a whole bunch of token respect. But the people who I'm making money for, all these gobs of money, they don't even know who I am. And I'm replaceable in their mind. I'm 100% replaceable. If my salary gets a little too much, cost cutting, I'm gone. And that's what you get. And so I would say that be aware of why would you want to give something, your entire existence, your purpose, your meaning, to people who really don't care about you, who won't care about you in the future. They'll only care about your contributions to them today. Wouldn't you rather give that to someone like, somebody who really might be a little bit more loving and more understanding, have a little bit more vested interest in your health? And so I'd say that it's like, don't play the game, reduce your expenses. And then you were talking about homesteading earlier. So what do you mean by that, Michael?
Yeah, kind of going back to transfer your wealth into something of value. I mean, depending on where you are, if you're in a city, then obviously you're limited on land and stuff. But you saw with COVID, living in cities isn't the most ideal situation. So a lot of people are going back to the land. And when you have a homestead, which is basically, for people that aren't very familiar, you just get can be a little plot of land, can be a big plot of land, but you start growing things that you eat, try to reduce your expenses by reducing your grocery bill, and just more security. Because like with COVID, a lot of things ran out at the store. So the chicken ran out of the store, but you have chickens in the backyard, you have their eggs, you're fine. And you're not reporting that to the government. You're supposed to if you're selling things, but
right. But if you're giving things away,
really wealth, and like you have cows and stuff, and the herd grows, you don't have to report taxes on that. So just things like this, more security. And if you want 12 kids like Anthony's telling you to have, then they can help out on the homestead.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, that's what it's saying. And I think that's what, what you said there's like, what are the things that don't show up on a tax return? That's absolutely right. If you have cows and and typically, cows are pregnant and they give a calf, that calf is yours. Now let's go over this. Right. The test for income is a cession of wealth. Yes. You have another cow. Clearly realize, yes, the cow's right there. Over which you have dominion. Yeah, you own the cow and you take its milk. You just had, right? I mean, that's a perfect example of how you kind of solve the test for income, but they don't know how to tax that. They just don't know how to, they haven't figured out how to tax that yet. So that's something like now that's tax-free income that's going to pay you income again and again. Now, maybe you take that milk and you decide to say, you know what, I'm going to start making cheese. I like making cheese, and maybe you just start saying, you know what, I'm just going to go around my neighbors and just introduce myself, and I'm going to give them a bunch of cheese. And then he's never say, oh, hey, here's some cheese I make. Well, I mean, that's the thing about human nature is like the reciprocity effect. The reciprocity effect is something I learned in the great marketer. What's his first name? His last name is Cialdini. But there's an inherent part of us when somebody gives you something. It is, and for most people, and if you're a narcissist, whatever, you're whatever, you're not going to worry about. For most people, though, there's an incredible urge to give back. You just I feel awkward here. You gave me this thing here. You're so nice.
Yeah. You feel
okay.
Dead.
Maybe they won't give you something that day. But now when they return a favor, hey, look, you know what? I made some sausage here. I just figured you guys wouldn't want some. Did you pay money for that sausage, Michael?
Nope.
Did you? Does it show up on a tax return anywhere?
Not if you're smart.
Right. And so there's a perfect example. So I think that's really, and like now look, these are things like for those of us who aren't. I know there's somebody listening who's on a homestead right now, and I appreciate that. But not everybody has the ability to have a homestead. But I think it's adopting the homestead mindset at least. Maybe you just have because you. I don't know if you consider your house in Naples, Florida, a homestead, but I'm imagining you kind of have the mentality.
Yeah, I'll get there. Just kind of moved in, but no, I mean, also just I think what we were getting back to is moving your money into things that actually hold value. So if you don't have land, then obviously you can move things into, things that don't depreciate, equities, precious metals, whether that's gold, silver, lead, other things that hold their value.
Yeah. Move yourself out of the US dollar, right? So I think the answer is like, yes, you know what? Our reality is we have to use the US dollar, but we're not going to make that the center of our life. The US dollar is just a quick tool. And the quicker you transfer that out of US dollar, the better, because it's an ever depreciating asset. US dollar is always depreciating. Always, 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 always. Yeah. So, okay, use it.
Got to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah, I got to get rid of this. It's always depreciating. So I think that's really the way out how to transcend the IRS. So I would say, if we're going to sum this up, that understand that the tax code is kind of clumsy in a way. It's kind of clumsy because it really doesn't tax, it taxes income. It's like, well, the reason why we're going to tax your income is because, well, you have a lot and therefore you can afford to pay more. where somebody with not as much can't afford. That's the kind of whole, justification behind it, is that things are good for you. Therefore, we're going to take some of the good away. And now, of course, that's, created that lie has kind of gone way, way, way out there. But at least we want to understand that that is sort of the overall model, but we don't want to stay in it. We want to get to real value as quick as we can. So take whatever money you earn, get it into something that will, again, pay you and won't show up on a tax return, like cows and fun things like that. And then I think
another thing is, like, also, if we're talking about fear and anxiety, then just buying things, that putting it into having extra storage of just like food and things, where supply chains, if COVID happens again, having storage of things that you need will kind of remove anxiety, where it's like, okay, I have a bunch of supplies that I would have had to buy, but they're not at the store right now, but I have a stockpile. So it kind of just gives you more level of comfort if you don't have.
Yeah, and you know what? And now you're bringing me something up there too, the store. And I would say this, and for myself, that I was a little bit, when I was living my big dream, working towards that big payoff, and then I guess I was going to have happily ever after somehow. I don't know how. I was living a bit of an insular life. I wasn't really engaged in my community that much, and I would say I often felt that I was better than it. Unfortunately, and I'm really embarrassed about that. The thing that transformed my life, one of the many things that did shortly after you came aboard, Michael, is I joined my church choir. I joined my church choir because I just wanted to sing, and I couldn't find people to sing with. I was trying to start bands, and everyone's avoiding me. It seemed like, oh, man, this is hard to find a band. So I went to my church because I'm like, you guys got to take me. You got to take me. And so I joined that in September of 2022. And this is the thing I would say, is that when you do something like that and you volunteer of yourself, who are you going to be around? Who are you going to be around? When I look to my right and I look to Jim, who's he going to be? Oh, Jim's a great guy who is so incredibly learned and knows so many things and is so well known and is so well loved. And he thinks I'm a good guy like him now. He's actually convinced I am. And when I look to my left, who am I around? When you volunteer for great things and not write a check. I mean, you might want to do, they wouldn't mind that too. But when you actually volunteer for a really good cause that doesn't seek fame and fortune. I mean, it's just a choir. We're never really it's just going to be a church choir. That's what it is. You find yourself surrounded by the greatest people. And so for me, it's not even close. Like, well, what's better to have, like a bunch of money, or to be surrounded by great people who are convinced you're a great guy, who will introduce you to other great people, who will move you down. And that's what I have found, that I've embarrassed by my previous belief that I was kind of too good for where I was, and I needed to be somewhere better, around better people, because what I've discovered is there's amazing people all around me. All these people were hiding in plain sight. And so that would be the other thing, is like, find something, really give yourself don't look for the credit, because where the credit is, that's where you get the people, you don't want to be around there. But when you're around people who don't care about the credit, that's where you will find the best people, and their good habits, their good beliefs will just kind of come over you. And then you're like, you might even convince yourself you are a good guy. So that's what I found, one of the most helpful things to do is to get out of this trap. Because now I walk down the street and somebody could stop me. Oh, yeah, I loved so much. You guys sounded so good the other day. And I'm like, all right, this is great. I love it. This is what I want. So I would say that's kind of like, in one way, it's like, we have to use dollars, but use them in a way, transfer your dollars in true wealth as soon as you can. And that could be, getting a homestead, or just paying the gas to go to choir, right? It could just be that. And then you will find a community of people who are just like you, who are giving, caring, and see things at a higher level. And then maybe there, as you sort of bring the awareness of this government that rules over us, that was, look, if Americans knew, if Americans could say freely that our government is our top enemy. The power of the income tax goes away.
Yeah.
But in order to be there, and I think this is it, you got to be smart. You got to be smart, because when you're in a panic, when you get in that depressive state, that's when your emotions may bring you down a path that isn't the best way to go, and it only actually furthers the trap.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what you were saying, if you storing your value in relationships with people and not just earning more and more, you kind of focus on something differently, and you're not as worried and stressed out, where kind of, as you were saying, you just kind of start feeling better about yourself. You're kind of forced to become a better person, and you focus more on relationships, kind of where you should put your true value, not where moth and rust will decay with monetary value, but kind of what brings you true joy and fulfillment, rather than just trying to stay ahead of the IRS, which is kind of a failing proposition as it
Can't
is.
win it. Yeah.
Then you just start to not really care as much.
Yeah.
You're focusing on other things, and if you're putting your energy into other things rather than serving the government.
Yeah. And I think there it is right there. You're aware of it, but you start to care less. You know, and I talked to, we're gonna wrap this up pretty shortly, but I talked to a potential client last week, Michael. I didn't tell you about this one yet. But a friend of us says, hey, I have a friend in Vietnam who really, he really needs to change his residency from Virginia to South Dakota, because he's still paying Virginia taxes, and he makes a ton of money, and he's got to stop paying all that money. So I talked to him, and he did well. He was an engineer in San Jose, living in Vietnam, and he did well in San Jose. And he said, look, if you are in tech and you want to make a bunch of money in tech, you got to be in America, because that's the only place that's going to pay you where it is. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Then he said something very interesting. He says, well, look, here's the thing. I live a very simple life. I go, oh, yep, I do traveling, but my travel budget, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 grand a year tops. And I don't really have a fancy place. I have a simple life. And the fact is, I have far more money. Each year, I make far more money than I could possibly ever spend. There's no reason for me to really need all this money. And he goes, so he said to me, he goes, honestly, for me, Virginia is where my parents are, and I will probably inherit their house. And I do kind of go back there, every year. He said, honestly, the money that I'm paying to Virginia, it's easier emotionally than me to going through the steps of making South Dakota my residency. It's like, I don't care. I have so much, and it's okay. I actually don't care. So all of this tax stuff, it's like, whatever, I'll just pay, the taxes on my, my long-term capital gains, and I'll pay it even to Virginia, even though I'm not there. And as I was listening to him, I was like, yeah, but you could pay so less, right? I was thinking of that. I'm like, yeah, right. But then I totally understood his point, though. I totally got it. That because in order to avoid the taxes, it requires an emotional cost. And you don't want to pay that emotional cost, because you don't want to even think about this for an hour. The hour of your time thinking about it is like, well, that's an hour I'm not going to get back. And so for him, he's like, look, the taxes are like, whatever, I'll pay them. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. And I really thought, I was like, man, that's something. I was really impressed. I was kind of impressed by that, that he has no interest in tax savings because it wasn't worth his time.
We see that a lot with potential expatriates, where that's talk about an emotional decision, giving up your citizenship.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you could save a bunch of money, but you can't go back.
I can't go back. I might want to go, and I might want to go back. And the opportunity to go back, even though I might not, it's still worth all the costs. And that's why, I mean, I would say, boy, I don't know how many people we talk to about renunciation. I would say about maybe only 30% go through with it, if that.
If that.
If that. I mean, they're like, yeah, I want to renounce. Okay, let's go through it. Yeah, I'm not going to do that because it's really hard emotional decision. You're like, all right, well, look. So, and I mean, I think it's a good way to live. So it's just not making the dollar the central part of your life. Understanding it's a tool. And by the way, I'm sure your church actually accepts dollars as donations, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
It does. Wouldn't you know that? Right. So it's absolutely a tool, and I don't think there's anything wrong with using it, right? There's not anything morally wrong with using it, but where the moral hazard is thinking it's something more than it is.
Yeah.
Thinking that is where true happiness will be. And it's just, constant times again and again where the money will just multiply the problem that you have. And that is, you haven't defined your own life. You haven't defined your own self enough. And you're looking for others to do that for you. And then when it's taken from you, now you are in a panic because it's part of your identity in a way. I think if you think about it, that if you have a dollar-centric life, if you have a materialistic life viewpoint, someone taking a whole bunch of your dollars all the time without you saying it is an existential crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
But if money's just part of your life, it's a thing. But my core is here. My core is with my family. My core is with my friends. My core is within my community. All right. You know what? They're stealing more money from me. Yeah, they always do, don't they? Yep, they do. And it doesn't hurt you as much. And it doesn't put you in that situation where you'll make a decision that might not be all that intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got it here. Now, I'm still utterly disgusted by the IRS and want to beat them and save our clients money any chance we get. And we want to still make sure that they don't get themselves into problems. So we do take our job pretty seriously. And I would suggest that, right now, if you are a U.S. expat, there's a tax deadline of June 17th is coming up. And if you haven't had anyone get on your return, you could always reach out to us to get that. Here, I'll give a general link here to irsmedic.com help. If you have a tax problem, everything going on, and you want to, if you want a tax team that truly understands this on a fundamental human level, I would suggest you reach out to us. Michael's a tax director. I am a tax attorney, Anthony Parent. We would love to help you out with your problem. You just go to irsmedic.com and we'll give you a help. Michael, any final words of wisdom before we conclude this podcast today?
Well, it's something that kind of came up during your last monologue right there. But people say that money's the root of all evil. But what the actual quote is the love of money is the root of all evil. So money itself is just a tool. It can be very helpful. And it's really just when you are attached to it, that's when you just start getting very anxious and fearful. But that's a distinction that's not made in society. And I think that's very helpful. But then also just going back to us, I think we're an actual tax team that's on your side.
Yeah.
So actually trying to help you because we know how morally dubious the tax system is and that it is a spiritual battle. And we're on our client's side. We're not working for the IRS.
And that's, I would say that's a big part. We actually do look at this as a spiritual battle. We really do. And that's part of what we want to do is keep your mind, you centered so that you're able to weather this storm, which will happen all the time, which can happen from time to time. But to keep it as that, we actually see this as a spiritual battle. That's really what it is. And, the spiritual battle, isn't going to be fought. I don't think we can expect to get great victories by, shooting a whole bunch of people. That often leads to results we don't like. So it's a spiritual battle that can be won once we all awaken. That's all we need to do. We just need to all awaken to the truth. And, the government's doing a great job. I would say actually congratulate the government on doing a great job of finally exposing themselves for years, because I didn't believe that the government was actually all that against us at times. I actually thought they did represent us. But now, thankfully, the government has exposed itself as truly the greatest enemy of the American people. But that doesn't mean we need to attack it, because in that attack, we often get the results we don't want, but rather we just need to raise the awareness of people to say, this is really what's going on. And that's the best way. And we really are on your side. We want to see you succeed. We want to see you have a great life and focus on true wealth for eternal happiness, potentially we're working for too, right? So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is a lively discussion. I'm curious if people would want more of something like this. So let me know in the comments if this is something that a format that you like, as a sort of a deeper discussion of taxation, far beyond what you can get anywhere else, only here at irsmedic.com. So I want to thank Michael again. Great job. And I want to thank Michael for being a part of the team. He is just amazing. Really a fantastic tax director. He's the kind of guy I would want to work for. He's the kind of guy I would want to be a client of. He is amazing. And it really starts with, I think, a great integrity of foundation and seeing things for truly what they are. I'm Anthony Parent of IRS Medic. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you know when we're going live. Have a great day. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Anthony. Take care.